The Bible confesses that the God of the Bible and the Quran originally came from Egypt. Read it for yourself. Hosea 12-9 Old Testament, and I that am the Yahweh Lord thy Elohim God from the land of Egypt. And the New Testament clearly states that the deity Amun, an Egyptian god, was there at the beginning of the creation of their God. Revelation 3:14 These things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. As we told you, it all came from Egypt. Even their God, in fact the very name YHWH, which became Jehovah, is from the Egyptian god He. Backwards you get YHWH. The Y is always a Tihu or Uwa, as used by the Muslims, is also from the same name. It all comes from the same place, Egypt. The purpose of this guidance from the masters is to show you how many Ura-et rulers of ancient Tamari Egypt were indeed Negroid or Nubian. Later mixing in with Indo-Arabs, they produced what is known today as Nubians, not to be mistaken for those of Nuba in the Sudan of Africa. Nubians are known by many, yet not by those whose heritage they belong. You must realize your great heritage. Take a firm grasp of it and hold on, and don't ever let it go or let it get away from you again, for another. Give them back their Roman Catholic, Christianity, Christism, which became many sects and denominations. Give them back their Indo-Arab Islam, Mohammedanism, Muslimism, the Arabs, which also became many sects and groups. And their Hebrewism, Israelitism, which is the Phoenicians and is the Russian mixed Palestinian religions. Many Europeans and Euro-Americans alike would have you accept Tamarayot Egyptians as only those Ura-et rulers from after a certain dynasty, which after a certain amount of mixing had occurred through the invasions of the Hekakasut Hyksos cursed seed of Canaan. And then again, after the immigration law was broken by Khufu, who was the incarnation of the deity Shamash, he allowed foreigners into the land of ancient Tamari Egypt. This same law was then broken again by Cleopatra VII. By doing your own research, you will succeed in finding and collecting much information that even some of the most outstanding historians and anthropologists, both ancient and modern, have not revealed to you. The evidence is as plain as the nose knocked off the Sphinx's face. Why? Because it is all inscribed in stone, recorded on monuments, undeniable evidence of facts on ancient Tamarae Egyptian civilization, and the Negroid race to which they originally belong. Millions of dollars have been spent in expeditions and explorations to find and unearth the marvelous wonders of the land of the true Ura-et rulers of this planet. But with a few exceptions, these experts have failed to tell the racial background or give deserved merits to the ancient Tamarae Egyptian culture and the true identity and characteristics of the people. Many of these writers, both in school textbooks and general history, refer to the ancient Tamarayot Egyptians as a white race, while others say Semitic stock, using the unproven Bible term which has become a slogan in all such histories, and of course that the ancient Egyptians were not Negroid. And all of your Bible stories about Egypt are not true nor proven. They are all myth. One can see that the validity of these authors' statements are null and void. The ancient Tamarayot Egyptians were not of a European and Euro-American nor and of their fictions, Bible or Quran stories as a Semitic race. In the Bible the Semitic are those who claim to be the children of the biblical patriarch of Abraham, called the Hebrew because he crossed over the Tigris, Euphrates, however found in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis 14:13. There was an Abram, whose name was changed to Abraham or Ibrahim by Muslim to hide the fact that he was a Chaldean, and they were also Negroid. The Bible and the Quran are books copied from the cuneiform tablets. And so are the Enuma epics, the Atrahasis, Gilgamesh, Elish, and many more. All the Bible and Quranic stories come from the Sumerian tablets which came from Egypt with added lies and fiction to them. What is even more unacceptable is the fact that they still hold this true today. And if you don't believe their lies, you are the cult. All monotheism religions are the real man-made religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam all man-made. A certain man who was a frequent visitor or black communities in America, and immigrated to America, yet a native to the country of Tamari, Egypt, was very surprised when he looked on his paperwork and it had Caucasian as his race. His name was Mostafa Hefni. He filed a suit to get the federal government to change his racial classification from white to black. Who are they trying to fool? There are many people who are American and Negroid that look very much the same as the real Tamarayot Egyptians in Africa. Just look at the picture, they are the same seed. Tamarayot Egyptians are not, and have never been Caucasoid. And nowhere will you find Caucasians by race, as being indigenous to any part of Africa in ancient Tamari Egypt, Sudan, Africa. Now many of the foreign invaders were Caucasoid and have tried to pass themselves off as Tamarayot Egyptians. Yet, they know nothing about the culture, language or people. Look at this Nubian male, the great Uttest Hamza el-Din of Nubia and this female. You can see they are of the same seed. This woman known as Mary C. York, mother of our Supreme Grand Hierophant, Amanubi Riktah. You see for yourself. In actuality, none of the European and Canaanites know the true Tama Rayat Egyptians, for there are many foreign invaders such as Turks and Greeks and Canaanites who have supplanted and assumed this identity, your identity, as their own. The original Tama Rayat Egyptians were full-blooded Nubuns or Negroids, and are the same people or Negroids or Nubians that you will find in America and Africa today after mixing. Accordingly, because of foreign invaders, mixing with your ancestors has occurred, so some of the dominant features are not as prevalent in all the people that are Negroid. However, many of these characteristics are still dominant along with various features seen today, yet and still the people are Tama Ray Egyptian. Now we are mixed, yet Nubian. We are now not just 9 ether but 7, and even 6 ether hair as well as various shades of skin color. We are the North and South Americans as well as the Caribbeans, Latin Americans, and Hispanics. They are all still Egyptians, just with a mixed seed. The ancient Tama Rayat Egyptians were full-blooded Nubuns, black with woolly 9 ether hair and thick lips, much like the features you find in many of the Negroid race today, all over the planet Ta-Earth. In the northern, or lower Tama Re Egypt, the shades of complexion were light or brown in color. After the invasions, those who live in the southern parts, or upper Tama Re Egypt were darker because of less mixing with foreign invaders. The ancient Tama Rayat Egyptians were not white nor yellow, and in this guidance from the masters, I will reintroduce one to the world as a nation of Negroid Tama Ray Egyptian men. There were no mixed breeds found among them until the later period of the empire. The ancient Tama Ray Egyptian, long before the birth of Caucasoid who are only 6,000 years old. The Tates or Tides Pygmy ruled and governed all of ancient Tama Re Egypt for many thousands of years without foreign interference, with exception of the time when ancient Tama Re Egypt was invaded by Hekakasut Hyksos, who were Canaanites as Amorites, Hittites. Their names can be found on the walls of Egypt. Just 2 of the 11 tribes of the cursed seed of Canaan, son of Ham and the sons of Noah. These are Bible names for Babylonians who became cursed with leprosy. Then spread all over the world just to mix their evil seed, which is why again, there are so many of a variety of features and complexions, yet, let me stress they are still Negroid in race. Their historians and philosophers are confused and refuse to allow anyone to see the fusion right, of the right knowledge about a people who are one and the same race. In the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis 11:5-8, it speaks about the Negroid deities gods of the Bible coming to the earth and wanting to confuse the language of the people, after they were already speaking one language and had become unified. Now, one must ask why would the deity of the Bible want to confuse the people once they had become as one? The deity of the Bible was not the deity of these people. This was the beginning of divide and conquer. Divide the people amongst themselves, so they can't communicate with each other. These deities were afraid of the potential these ancient people were capable of, because once you have a unified force, mind, body and soul, there is nothing one can't do. Some say the Tama Rayat Oxum Egyptians descended from the Ethiopians such as a so-called scholar, Heron's research of the African nation, on pages 313-14 says, real name First Thebes, Waset, Nuamun, as well as the states in general of Upper Tama Re Egypt, are called in the proper annals of the priest colonies from Meroe in Oxum Ethiopia, and at Thebes the service of Jupiter Amun, whose temple was the common center of the state, gives itself a striking evidence of such was the case Memphis, Het-Kapata, whose situation was so remarkable from dam and embankments is called a colony of Thebes. The other cities of Egypt likewise derive their descent directly or indirectly from Ethiopia, of which they considered themselves as colonies and which their religion and institution furnished abundant proofs. The ancient cities of Meroe and Nahisi Nubia Sudan, Africa were ruled by the same people that spread themselves as colonies and ruled as the ancient Tama Re Egyptian. Because of their great prosperity, they in turn were the parents of others. Did you also know that the pyramids in Nahisi Nubia outnumber those all over ancient Tama Re Egypt? An example of scientists making attempts to discredit the true identity of the ancient Tama Rayat Egyptians, written by the scientist, Pritchard, in his Natural History of Man page 153 says, true Negro confirmation requires no comment, but the practical eye readily detects a few heads with decidedly mixed character in which those of the Negro predominates. For these I propose the name of the Negroid cranium. For while osteological development is more or less that of the Negro, the hair is long but sometimes harsh, thus indicating the combination of features which is familiar in the mulatto of the present day. There remains other examples in which the Caucasian traits predominate, but it is partially blended with those of the Negro. The pictures on the wall alone clearly say otherwise. This makes no sense. Certain physical characteristics clearly belong to only certain races of people, Nubian Negroid and their mixed children Nubians, Negros. Pritchard even agrees with this when he states in the above paragraph certain features are predominantly Negro or Negroid, even to the shape of the skull. What Caucasoid or European has a Negroid skull? Traits. You must be able to perceive through the web of deception, and be conscious enough to fight the adverse forces at work, that make you forget your origins. For if you were to ever retrace and reconnect with your ancestors and descendants, the Tama-Rayot Egyptians, the feats that were accomplished in ancient times would be duplicated today, although this has already begun among the Nuwapians and the Tama-Re, Egypt of the West. Pritchard begins his argument with the Ethiopian being a Negroid and ends where he begins, the Tama-Re Egyptian being a Negroid. They are the same people from different parts of the land and thus influenced are a product of the elements there. For instance, Ethiopians tend to be of a more greenish hue because of the oxidation of the iron, as opposed to the Sudanese who have more of a reddish hue because of the dominance of copper in the soil there. Yet, and still, they are the same people, Tama-Rayot Egyptians. Once the invasion of Tama-Re Egypt by foreign lands occurred and the power to rule Tama-Re Egypt shifted to foreign hands, the complete identity of the person or Tama-Rayot Egyptians was reclaimed by these foreign people as their own. The dress, the speech, the customs and the rituals fell under the command of these strangers. These strangers even emulated and accepted our own culture as their own, which is why many mummies of foreigners have also been embalmed, mummified and buried in our lands in burial tombs. Make note this was after the fall of the original Tama-Re Egyptian Ur rulers. These invaders were the Hekakasut Hyksos who lived as the Canaanites in the land of Canaan, mentioned in the Old Testament, Genesis 12:5, and at one point they were the Ur rulers of part of the Tama-Re Egyptian Empire, mostly the northern or of lower Tama-Re Egypt. In the Old Testament, in the book of Leviticus chapter 13:36, it mentions and describes this cursed seed physically as lepers. Then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the scabs be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair, he is unclean. Also read the entire chapter of Leviticus 12:13 and 14, the curse of leprosy. You will see the description of the cursed leprous seed. From Genesis 9:25, and even Abraham in Genesis 24:3 told his sons not to mix with the Canaanites, and also his son Isaac. Genesis 24:32 repeated this commandment from their God YHWH. If you go to Leviticus 18-7, you will see the curse spoken of as the curse of nudity, which is mentioned way back in Genesis 9:25-26. It was considered forbidden to look upon the nudity, Leviticus 18-7, of your parents. This was why Ham's seed became cursed, because he looked upon his father, Noah's nakedness. Ham himself was not cursed. He was black. But his fourth son Canaan was cursed. Canaan was the beginning of the white race. Read Genesis 15 and you will see the enslaver of Abraham's seed were Amorites. These same people throughout history have plagued the world, robbed, and raped people and ransacked everyone's culture, wealth and land, all around the world. They are beings without a culture and without a purpose. Everything about them is fake. Their philosophy of conquer, convert or kill them, was their creed for the crusade. They couldn't have lived during the time of Auset, Isis, and Asaru, Osiris, and that is why they had to reenact the life story of the ancient Tama-Re Egyptians to live and experience it. That is why they are the best or masters of acting and theatrics. They have been playing the parts of others since the beginning of their story. When the Hekakasut Hyksos came, they conquered a small area called Gebaline in the delta along the trade route to southern Palestine and reigned for a period of 100 years. Yet, this was ended with the rule of Ephrati Pharaoh Seqenenre and the line of Nubian Ur rulers that started the rulership of what they record as the 18th dynasty. Pritchard offers his comments about the features of Tama-Re Egyptians, in their complexion and in many of their physical peculiarities. The Egyptians were an African race, in the eastern and even in the central parts of Africa. We shall trace the existence of various groups in physical character, early resembling the Egyptians, and it would be difficult to observe a gradual deviation among many African nations of that continent from the physical type of the Egyptians, to the strongly marked character of the Negro, without any very decided break or interruption. This statement is true, not to mention a gradual change in complexion occurs in everyone after standing in the sun for a period of time, yet it does not change one's race or one's genetics. Read the Sons of Canaan scroll number 145 and the Melanite Children scroll number 133. You must see Tama-Rayot Egyptians as a people having a wide variety of characteristics. Below you will see some discoveries supporting the fact that Tama-Rayot Egyptians were very much indeed Negroid blacks. Rawlinson's, in his History of Egypt, page 24 says, "It is even conceivable that the Egyptians were produced by a gradual advance and amelioration from that of the Negro." Gerald Massey says in his book Egypt, the Light of the World, page 251 states, "The dignity is so ancient that the insignia of the pharaohs evidently belonged to a time when the Egyptians wore nothing but the girdle of the Negro." This is referring to the ancient Tama Rayot Egyptians who were known to wear animal skins, such as the leopard skin that were worn by the Wapot priests. In 1883 AD, Captain Burton, an English explorer, wrote Gerald Massey, saying, "You are quite right about the African origin of the Egyptian. I have sent home 100 skulls to prove it." The Greek historian Herodotus says, "The Colchians certainly appear to be of Egyptian origin, which indeed, before I had conversed with any on the subject, I had always believed. But I was desirous of being satisfied. I interrogated the people of both countries, and the results were, it seemed that Colchian had better remembrance of the Egyptian than the Egyptian had of the Colchian. The Egyptians were of the opinion that the Colchians were descended from the troops of Sesostris' army. To this I was also inclined, because they were black and their hair was short and curled." The scientist Volney says, "The ancient Egyptians were really Negroid of the same species with all the natives of Africa, and though as it might be expected, after mixture for many ages with the Greeks and Romans, they have lost their identity of their first color, yet they still retain strong marks of their first conformation." Brush, Egypt under the Pharaohs, page 401, says, "I have expressed the opinion that the Egyptian migrated from a prime home in Asia, yet this idea is opposed by another view, by a method of historical data that the origin of the Egyptian people would have to be sought in the Nigrishan, Negro, Warba, Africa. These are supposed to have cultivated it and created one of the few centuries of civilization in the ancient world without losing or renouncing the peculiarities of their African custom. Their mingling with a Syro-Arabian nomad race who penetrated Egypt from the east and also with the Libyan from the west is supposed to have given origin to the Egyptian of today, in which the African blood predominates. Many scholars and researchers agree that the ancient Tama Rayot Egyptians were Negroid in the early dynasties before the Hekakasut Hyksos invasion were predominantly Nubian. However, the most prosperous reign as far as monuments period of reign, is said to have existed in the 18th dynasty, ruled by Nubians, and most of your temples and monuments are in Nubia, even the great Ramesses II and Hatshepsut, the true builders of all the great structures are Nubians. Before that, was the Great Pyramid and Sphinx of Anu Heliopolis. This was 10,500 years ago built by the Nubians, with the help of deities from Pa-Sahu the Orion star. They were Negroid Ura-at, rulers. Throughout the 17th and 18th dynasty, it is said to have been the golden age of Tama Re Egyptian history. These rulers were from Lower Tama Re Egypt and took part in driving out and overthrowing the rule of the Hekakasut Hyksos. These dynasties were founded by a true Tama Re Egyptian Ephrati pharaoh Taai, Senechner, who began the elimination of the Hekakasut Hyksos, a process that was completed by his son Taa II Sinkanir Tau II, and grandson Kamos and top ruling military man Amos son of Abana, founder of the 18th dynasty. The Hyksos were attacked by surprise under the command of Kamos, who fought hard for 3 years and then, was continued by Amosis, until all of Tama Re Egypt was from under Hekakasut Hyksos rule. The wives of these Negroid founders were Tetishri, wife of Taai, Senechner, Sinkanir Tau I, Ahotep the wife of Tau II, and Ams Nefertiri, Amos Nefertari, wife of Amosis. Tetishri outlived her husband and son, and her grandson played a key role in gaining a stronghold over the rule and complete control of Tama Re Egypt. Ams Nefertiri also played a major influence during the rule of her husband Amosis. She was the daughter of Kamos, and yet so-called foreign scholars again make attempts to take away the nobility and race of the ancient Tama Rayot Egyptians. Rawlinson says, the complexion of the Ethiopian queen was ebony blackness, and that she was the most attractive personality and was called the beautiful companion of Ams. Where in the records does it say, this Urit female ruler was from Oxum, Ethiopia, when the word Ethiopian itself is Greek and simply means black? Again, these are terms that were assigned by them, so they will appear to have some kind of dominance over knowledge of one's own self, that through the teaching of the ancient Egyptian order Aeo is placed within your reach. If Ams Nefertiri, Amos Nefertari, was able to become wife of the Ephrati pharaoh or Ura ruler and be very influential and productive to help maintain control over the Tama Re Egyptian empire, which she did, why do these Europeans and Euro-American so-called scholars with their westernized thinking, feel it necessary to say she was not of noble or royal birth, and speak about it as an authority on another people's life, culture and land not their own? Why would one begin and then continue listening to another who has no right knowledge, right wisdom nor the right understanding about anything or anyone else on the planet? To put it simply, why would anyone listen to that? Is a person not in a state of nuwapu, or sound right reasoning? What little knowledge they do have, is from their own thinking or information that was given to them and passed down, watered information with their interpretation, for others to accept their word, which has been proven over and over again to be worthless. One must also not be fooled into thinking these boundary lines that are on maps today that divide up the continent of Africa, as if they existed during ancient Tama-Re Egyptian rule. The borders of ancient Tama-Re Egyptian empires were vast and stretched, encompassing most of Africa. This is true by virtue of the fact that in the tomb of Ramesses II tobacco was found, a crop which did not grow in the immediate area of Tama-Re Egypt where Ramesses II dwelled. Yet, it did grow near the western coast of Africa. The borders of the empires were vast, and the mummy they display as Ramesses II is not the real Ramesses II. The truth of this will be taught in the temple or the ancient Egyptian order to members only. There is a key. The Urtat female ruler Nefertiri was still from the same Negroid race, and that is more important than status. Most of these Egyptian women would remain within the bounds of their living quarters. No foreign woman was equal with those wives that were considered common. Yet, they were of the same blood as the Urartu rulers and Nefertat pharaohs. This dynasty was actually founded by this Negroid Urtat female ruler, and for this she was the most venerated woman in Tama-Re Egyptian history. She was called the wife of the Neter deity Amun and the ancestress of the 18th dynasty, which marked the glorious period in Tama-Re Egyptian annals. According to Budge's History of Egypt in Volume A, page 182-3 says, "It has often been said that the period of the 12th dynasty was the golden age of Egypt, but if a nation's greatness is to be rated by its material, wealth and power, this title will be more justly applied to the period of the 18th dynasty, which undoubtedly marks the highest point which Egypt's civilization and power had ever reached." During the joint reign of Urtat female ruler Nefertari, and Ura ruler Amosis, was Tama-Re Egypt restored to her former glory. She too outlived her husband and lived during the rule of their son Amenhotep I. Because of this, Urtat female rulers exercised their authority during their reign. This set a pattern for those to follow after. The reason the names of the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty assumed the name of Amenhotep or Amenephis in Greek, was from their ancestral line from their mother Urtat female ruler Nefertari, who again bore the title as the wife of the Neter deity Amun. Her son and 3 other princes of this dynasty also shared the name of Amenhotep or Amenhotepti, meaning the sons of Amun. Amenhotep I, Amenephis F, was a great promoter of art and peace, and his name occurs on general monuments in Tama-Re Egypt. These same so-called scholars apply their divide and conquer theory again, and say Amenhotep I, Amenephis I, also married a princess from Oxum, Ethiopia, whose name was Neferti, similar to the name of his mother. The name Neferti was commonly known to the Tama-Re Egyptian Urtat female rulers. This Oxum, Ethiopia that these so-called scholars kept referring to is actually the area of Kush and Nubia, Sudan, Africa, who are definitely Negroid beyond a shadow of a doubt. All Sudanese are Egyptian. They just think they are Arabs, but they are not. If one were to look at the modern maps without the longitude and latitudinal lines, one would see the areas of Oxum, Ethiopia, and Nahisi, Nubia, are right next to each other, which again means the ancient Tama-Re Egyptians are and were Negroid, not Caucasoid or some mixture of another unknown, nameless race. They never actually say who the Tama-Re Egyptians are, because they are so busy telling you who they are not and they who could not be. Why? Because of their closed and racially biased minds. But of course, to admit this openly would show that the identity of the true founding fathers of all civilization weren't and are still Negroid. That is why when they refer to Tama-Re Egyptians, they always promote the 18th dynasty, which is also a late period. Why is there no reference made to the ruler of dynasty of the Old Kingdom when there is reference to a ruler of Ur, a ruler from Upper Tama-Re Egypt? These scholars consider them common or not of a noble birth, as you have seen previously. This is the westernized man's mentality about the Negroid race, and its so-called Tama-Re Egyptian scholars and historians that lived in the shores of America and Europe. They don't want you to make the connection. You are the same people. Although you may not know that, the Tamahu is very aware. Deep down he is afraid that those great people will resurrect and regain dominion of the shores of North and South America, as well as Africa, which was once also ruled by ancient Tama-Re Egyptians, the Negroids, Nubians and Nuwapians of today. Amenephis I was succeeded by his son Thutmose I, Thutmose, who was a Negroid Ephrati pharaoh. According to Rowlingson, the black wool showed itself in the countenance, where the short, depressed, flat nose and unduly thick lips are of Ethiopia, rather than Tama-Re Egyptian type. This again is according to who they decided the Tama-Re Egyptians were and what period in history they decided to start. They have no idea what they are talking about and are in denial to themselves. They are on their last limb, and despite their attempts to deceive you by sabotaging and sinking Negroid sarcophagus from the sight of the general public, while being shipped by sea, and knocking off the noses of certain statues because the noses were a little too wide and full. It doesn't really matter because the truth, facts and new WAPO have returned to the minds of the people, and they are becoming more and more aware that one's roots undoubtedly stem from ancient Tamari Egypt. The northern regions, or lower Tamari Egypt, such places as Heliopolis, Bubastis, Alexandria, Damietta on up to the Mediterranean, were mixed with foreign people. This happened because they were easier to attack from the water. Once you go down past Cairo, to Memphis, Fayum, Heracleopolis, Hermopolis, Asyut, Abydos, Thebes, Edfu, Aswan, Philae people were all black. These are also the places where all the temples, monuments and statues were found. They keep giving credit to the wrong people. Let me say it again, the original Tama Rayat Egyptians were and are still Negroid. This is where the variation of features occurred. However, before the European or Caucasoid invasion, thickness or broadness or lack of it, and the variation of features in ancient Tama Rayat Egyptians, never separated black people from each other. Again, their plan to divide and conquer is the scheme used to give them a little leverage to get in between the ancient Tama Rayat Egyptians to breed racial complexes, because they cannot get over their own inferiority complexes of their own race. They, the Tamahu, have always been a violent people and get along with no one. While Tama Rayat Egyptians get along with everyone, and that's why everyone went to ancient Tamari Egypt. Pa-ur the ruler Thutmose I, Thotmes, Tutmosis, was succeeded by his son Thutmose II, Thotmes, Tutmosis, whose reign was very short, and he reigned jointly with his sister, Ephrati-wa-Urtat pharaoh and female ruler Hatshepsut. Because of this joint rulership, Thutmose I, Thotmes, Tutmosis' power and influence were overshadowed by his sister Thutmose II, Thotmes, Tutmosis, was succeeded by his son Thutmose III, Thotmes, Tutmosis, who was called Alexander the Great of Tamari Egypt by historians. This Ephrati pharaoh conquered the known world and caused the names of 628 different nations to be carved upon the walls of real names. This was first Karnak and a tablet of victory to be set in the temple. Thutmose III, Thotmes, Tutmosis, was succeeded by his son, Amenhotep II, Amenephis II, who was succeeded by his son Thutmose IV, who married a woman from Oxum, Ethiopia named Mutmoea, who was the mother of his son Amenhotep III, Amenephis III, also known as Nebmat-Re. His coronation name followed the principles of Mut. Amenhotep III tried to stress the importance of this Netert female deity by using her formula called Kaime, meaning appearing or arising the same time as Mut. There is an inscription referring to Amenhotep III, Amenephis, he who lives by Mut, might. Wilkerson in his book Ancient Egypt, page 42, says about the features of Amenhotep III, Amenephis III, the features of this monarch cannot fail to strike everyone who examines the portraits of the Egyptian rulers, as having more in common with the Negro than of any other pharaoh, in consequence of his mother being of Ethiopian origin. There is no consequence from one mixing with one's own self. The ancient Tamari Egyptians in the geological location of Oxum, Ethiopia today was no different than those Tama Rayat Egyptians in the geological location of Tamari Egypt then. You know this to be true by the fact that the lifelike statue of Amenhotep IV in Nefertiti look the same, and the only way this is possible is if they are the same race of people. The real picture or face of Nefertiti is not the Romanized one held on display in the Berlin Museum, shown in most books. The Romanized picture of Nefertiti is actually the face of the Roman female deity Athena. Rawlinson says in his book Ancient Egypt, Volume 2 page 271, Amenephis III was also a black pharaoh. His mother seems to have been from the Gala tribes of Oxum, Ethiopia. He is supposed to have derived his strange physique from his material ancestors who are thought to have been an Abyssinian of the Gala family. Here they are talking about the Urtat female ruler Ti, who became the royal wife of Amenhotep III. She also was from Nubia and those countries of Upper Tamari Egypt, where you find thicker lips and broader noses. Here again is the downplay of features and race, because these features are so different than their own. When Urtat female ruler Ti was 13, she married Amenhotep III, Amenephis I, and as he got up in age most of his political dealings were left to her command, which she handled very well. Near his late years, Amenhotep had his son Amunhotep IV, Amenephis IV, became a co-regent and also shared the belief of Atun, and started building temples to honor Atun. On the temple of Amenhotep III located at Luxor, Amenhotep III had two architects, Suti and Hor, carve a poem, which is the preface to the famous hymn to Atun. Amenhotep III also had a royal barge named Splendor of Atun. Although the grand beauty of the elaborate decoration of the temple of Amenhotep III, Amenephis III, at war at Luxor has faded, the stonework still stands to be marveled. Under the guidance of Master or Chief of Works Amenhotep son of Hapu, who although not considered of royal birth, was the most powerful man in the country at the time, because he belonged to the priesthood of Amun. Amenhotep son of Hapu was born in At-Ribis in the delta of the Nile, also Negroid, Nubian, born during the rule of Thutmose III, Tutmosis. His position in the palace of the hierarchy was so exalted that he was bestowed the favor of building his own sanctuary, a supreme honor. Amenhotep, son of Hapu, was also appointed the master of ceremonies, over military recruiting, directed quarry of the red sandstone called the Miracle Stone, and this stone was said to be under the protection of the Neteratum. The work of this man can be seen all over ancient Tama-Re Egypt from Athribis, his place of birth, to Nubia and Karnak. Statues of him are in the temple of Amun, to intercede to Pa-Neter the deity Amun on behalf of the devotee that would come to worship at the temple. He was also summoned Hui, making him a hereditary prince. Amenhotep, son of Hapu, was also the master builder behind the luxurious temple at Karnak, and has left trademark monuments made of sandstone instead of granite all over Tama-Re Egypt. During the reign of Amenhotep IV, Amenhotep continued his work, and there are records of him being at Tel El Armana, building the erection of monument for Atun. Although the ruler Amenhotep I started the doctrine or Atun, the full spread of this doctrine was placed in the hands of his son, Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, Ankhatun. It is because of these teachings that Ankhatun was called a heretic king. These teachings seem contrary to the priesthood of Amun, and it appeared Amenhotep IV, Amenephis, Ankhatun, changed the reverence from all the Neterot deities to the respective one, the source of life being Atun. When in fact all he was saying was to give reverence to all of the Neterot as one. The same concept of respecting nature and all her forces is also found in these teachings and throughout pamphlets of the ancient Egyptian order Aeo Amenhotep IV or Ankhatun worshipped Atun, meaning the source of all life, which is one of the original triad of Atum-Re, Atun-Re and Amun-Re. This also included the Neterot deities themselves. If one were to read the book that was inspired to Ankhatun to record the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is properly named Coming Forth by Day, one would see throughout its entirety nothing but praise and prayers of respect to and for many of the Neterot deity. In ancient Tama-Re Egypt, nature or Neter or Pa-Neterot, the deities were respected for the part they played in man's everyday life. These forces of nature are real forces that respond. And that is why ancient Tama-Re Egypt was such a successful civilization that the world is still in amazement about today. The reign of Amenhotep IV, Amenephis, Ankhetori, also referred to as Khwetan, was considered unpopular, and when he passed on to a higher life, he had no male heir to the throne, but did leave 3 daughters. He had 6 altogether. It was a custom that the line of descendancy be passed on through the daughter and not the son. So Ankhesenamun, Anksenpotun, the daughter of Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti, was married to Tut-Ankhatun, who was also a child of Amenhotep IV and Kia, another wife. In this way, Tut-Ankhamun, Neb-Khepri-Re, was also able to ascend to the throne. According to Brooksby in volume Egypt Under the Pharaohs, pages 5 to 10 to 12, it says that Tut-Ankhamun is called the royal son of Cush, meaning Oxum Ethiopia. The only reason they are pointing out the fact that he is Negroid is because they cannot claim him as their own. Not to mention, Tut-Ankhamun also bears a strong resemblance to his paternal grandmother, Pa-Urtat the female ruler Tia, who was undoubtedly of Negroid birth. Pa-Ur the ruler Tutankhamun was considered a great politician as well as a statesman. When Tut-Ankhamun ascended the throne of Tama-Re Egypt, he found the country much out of harmony because of his father's reign. He was quickly persuaded by Ai, and later Horemheb, to re-establish the worship of Amun and move the capital back to Hetkapata, Memphis. In order to restore national unity in Tama-Re Egypt, Tut-Ankhamun went back to the original faith of Tama-Re Egypt and restored the worship of Amun. While he previously held the name Tut-Ankhatun, Neb prayer, it was changed to Tut-Ankhamun, which means the living image of Amun. He restored the city of Waset, Thebes, New Amun, to her former glory, with perfect unity throughout the empire. In his brief but glorious reign, Tama-Re Egypt was at peace with all nations and Thebes was a world's capital, which is better described in a line of Homer: not all proud Thebes' unrivaled walls contain the world's great Urtat, female ruler of the Tama-Re Egyptian plain. That spreads her conquest over 1,000 states and pours her heroes through 100 gates. The next set of Negroid Urartu rulers that are well known reigned during the 19th dynasty. These rulers were known as the Ramessides, starting with Ramses I, who was said to be the vizier of Horemheb, who ruled Tama-Re Egypt for a time after the death of Tutankhamun. Ramesses I is said to be the son of Seti, a troop commander under Horemheb. However, other sources say he was also a son of Amenhotep I that was placed in the care of a king of Aksum, Ethiopia at the age of 5. This Ramesses was also known as Sesostris. Under Sethos I, Sesostris began the repair of the damage to the sanctuaries and temples of the Negroid deities that had become overtrodden with weeds. Then the great Ur ruler, Ramesses II, built colossal a statue all over Tama-Re Egypt, and fathered a line of Ura-at rulers that continued on to in the 20th dynasty. One must pay close attention to the faces of these rulers, who were beyond a shadow of doubt Nubian, Nuwapian, Tama-Re Egyptian. The focal point of this book was to inform you about the truth of your origin as a people that you should be proud of, that none can deny you of this direct link to the founding fathers of civilization. Regardless if they accept it or not, there is no denying what is permanently carved in stone all over ancient Tama-Re Egypt. Although many attempts were made to hide this truth from you, it has not worked. The ancient Negroid deities have returned to regain their rightful place, and to put things back in order in accordance with the forces of nature that helped keep the balancement and harmony of ancient Tama-Re Egypt and her ancient people in their daily lives. This guidance of the masters is to help you to wake up and realize the direction of the path you must take to find your way home to ancient Tama-Re Egypt, because in order to know where you are going, you must know where you came from. Life usually goes in a cycle, with the only thing being constant is change. Are you ready to regain your place also? There were no such things as plagues in Egypt. Everything they said is not true. If you go to the Muslims' Quran and the Christians' Bible, you will find that all this did not take place. Psalms 105:23 Israel also came into Egypt, in the land of Ham. Ham in Egypt, Mitzrayim, is used interchangeably. I Kings 9:20-21 And all the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which were not of the children of Israel, their children that were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel also were not able utterly to destroy. Speaks of the Canaanite tribes. Exodus 25, the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, the sins of Ham on his son, Canaan. Ezekiel 31:2 Son of man, speak unto Pharaoh king of Egypt, and to his multitude, whom art thou like in thy greatness? Egypt and Israel are equal in greatness according to this verse. Isaiah 19:1 The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. The so-called idols of Egypt still stand. This is misinformation.